Hey, fellow booktubers. I just wanted to have a quick second here to talk to you about a couple things I was thinking about the other day as it relates to some of our favorite novels, some of our favorite pieces of writing that are extremely popular in the society and in pop culture at large, whether it be through movies, music, just different things, different novels that have taken on kind of a life of their own. And the way they can become misrepresented in pop culture, and even avid readers who might have never picked up this particular novel, this particular piece of writing, because of the way it's perceived in the larger cultural consciousness, and how that can create an aversion to trying out these books and these novels that actually are brilliant, but they've kind of been maybe watered down or just reinterpreted for the larger cultural milieu, and that has changed the whole notion and idea of what the novel is about. I guess the most classic example of this would be Frankenstein, but I think everybody knows, even if you've never read Frankenstein, that's kind of the go-to of, the book. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a wildly different story and narrative and layered revelation than the movie, Boris Karloff movie, or all the different interpretations of Frankenstein's monster throughout the years. The novel itself is very different from that. So I think we kind of all realize that. I think, however, even with those who are very familiar with certain texts, they still even might be influenced by the larger pop cultural interpretations and have forgotten actually the realities of the text. And two great examples of this, I feel like, that I've recently read for the first time. Again, the reason being, which I'll explain in a little bit, is because I had a certain notion of this novel as this wildly romantic, passionate love story about unrequited love or lost love, or Romeo and Juliet style inability to ever truly connect. And it is not that at all, and it's actually something much more wildly beautiful than that. And the other novel is one of my favorite novels of all time, and it is another possibly classic example of I don't want to say missing the point, because I think everybody has their ability to receive and interpret a text to an extent in their own way, right? I mean, you've got to use the text as a reason for this interpretation, and if there's something that's wildly a gap there in what your interpretation has turned out to be, I think that does need to be corrected in a sense. I mean, just because you might end up enjoying the novel a lot more with those added complexities to the story. So I wanted to talk just real quickly about these two novels, one being Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. There's the Penguin Black Spine edition, which I've only read this once, and the Black Spine is cracked. So, just so you know, these aren't always the best to get if you're actually going to be opening them up and reading them frequently, because this one's already spine's almost destroyed. And then, again, one of my favorite novels of all time, F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Here is the classic photo that was on the original cover. I don't like these white borders, but The Great Gatsby and Wuthering Heights. And Wuthering Heights, I'll start with Wuthering Heights. I won't go into the details of the novel. Might be some light spoilers here, but I really just want to talk about the fact this book, to me, is a beautiful book, but it's a cruelly passionate book, and there are some just horrible people, horrible love. There's a lot of cruelty in this book, and a lot of beautiful Gothic imagery, right? There a lot of those things you think about with Wuthering Heights from a standpoint of the moors and the wind and the fog. That's all there. That hasn't been reinterpreted because it's romantic, in the larger cultural conscience sense. But the narrative itself is just a brutal, cruel narrative. And you have Heathcliff, which I always thought of the way that he's represented as this dark, mysterious, romantic figure. And if you look, he has a cruel life. He does. But he does cruel things. And you could argue it's because of that upbringing and that life, certainly. But it's a vengeful, he keeps a young man intellectually limited and keeps his son, a plot for his son to marry his cousin so that he can kind of exact his revenge by owning everything and playing these long, really long, super long game vengeful acts on people. And oh man, and it's a ghost story in the end as well. And so it's not this unrequited love or passionate, beautiful, dark romance. It's a lot of cruelty with a lot of beauty intertwined. And so to that point, it's to me, it's way better than the way it's been interpreted and the way people even maybe who have read it or maybe remember reading it when they were young interpret it themselves as some kind of passionate love affair. They're and even some people who are way brighter than I am, who host podcasts or discuss things. I was listening to a podcast on certain great books, and they were talking about Wuthering Heights, and they were talking about the ending and the beauty of the ending, which is the last page is beautiful, and there's a famous last sentence. But to me, the sentence was completely misinterpreted in the fact of this Lockwood telling our story. He doesn't get it. Like, that's the point at the end of the novel. His line about, he couldn't, basically saying he couldn't imagine these two dead people coming back to haunt anything. That they're quiet, everything's so cool, and people misinterpret that as in somehow this Lockwood having some inner knowledge about the narrative, and the whole point is that he doesn't. Right? He is oblivious to the things that we are hopefully are not. And so different things like that are ways that we have our own mindset, me included, about how we perceive something, and then it gets perpetuated and becomes this larger idea of the novel that was never at all what was intended. And that's Wuthering Heights, right? But Wuthering Heights, you still have the romance, the passion, all those themes and ideas are still there. Unrequited love is a major part of it, of course. So those themes are still there. So it's not like it's completely dismantled the kind of notions and themes and thrust of the narrative. I would say almost completely in most any interpretation or any idea that somebody might have about the Great Gatsby, however, is completely based on some jazz era idea of decadence and champagne glasses. Ever since this has gone into the public domain, there have been so many new covers. You can't beat the classic cover here, but all these covers are, to me, so indicative of what I mean. You go look at a Great Gatsby cover, and it's champagne glasses overflowing. It's the Flapper Girls, or whatever they're called, dancing, and that party style. What you think of? People have Gatsby parties where everybody dresses up and pretends like they're rich and has these decadent parties and cars. And the thing is that's definitely in Great Gatsby, but it's all to show the emptiness of all of that. Yeah, the novel itself is about tragic loneliness. It's about 100 different things too, but one of them is certainly the loneliness and detached feeling, not only of Gatsby but of Nick being surrounded by these people, and that inability to ever grasp, whether it be that green light at the end of the dock or that friendship. You might have felt like you were getting close to that famous, one of my favorite lines too, about the last enchanted object having diminished by one. One of the few remaining objects in Gatsby's perception having diminished once this dream has been brought down to a physical reality. Different things like that are the beauty, and to me, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons I return to The Great Gatsby is because of that. The way Fitzgerald describes that loneliness, and the way he describes that emptiness, or suggests that emptiness beyond all the cars and the money and the wealth and the parties. Gatsby's standing alone. Nick's alone. And to take that and to put it into the cultural consciousness as, it's about rich people. And it's about rich people partying, and then there's a murder involved, or it's like that there. And I understand why we do that, because that's fancy. I mean, that sells, and people do want to be like that, want to have their mansions with their 2 pools and all that. But reading the novel, Fitzgerald kind of, because he wanted that in a lot of ways too, right? But he's pointing out the fact of how empty that dream is, how empty some of these dreams we have, how empty they are, and to misinterpret that to where somebody doesn't pick this up because they don't want to read about rich white people. I understand, and I felt the same way, before. I never read this for any class at all that I can recall, but just picking it up because it's short and you could read it in a day, and then finding such beauty in there, and it was almost this agitation of why did I believe this, right? Why was I so naive to not actually read the text myself? And I feel like the same way. I'm kicking myself now that I never read Wuthering Heights much sooner, because it is so much more interesting than the love affair, dark romance that some people try to portray it as, whether that be for ticket sales or just because they remember it in a certain way when they read it when they were a teenager. I don't know, but I'm so glad I did end up reading it, and that it was. It is a cruel book, like I said, but I did not expect that. Maybe that's why it made it all the crueler, was because, I expected it to be more of the love story that we kind of conventionally think of, only maybe a little bit spookier. But yeah, there was a lot more to that. And talk about dealing with loneliness. Wuthering Heights does it in numerous ways, different from The Great Gatsby, but I would say both of them too. You both have the character, whether it be Heathcliff or Gatsby, who wanders away out of the book and comes back with this elegance, this certain type of refinement to a degree. But there's also this obvious roughness beneath it, in order to, win a love, or at least manipulate a love. And so Heathcliff and Gatsby actually do resonate and kind of play off each other in certain ways that I never expected. So there's that aspect of intertextuality there as well that I certainly never expected to find in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights and Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. That I think was a very interesting kind of narrative link. Not intentional, of course. I say of course, but I don't think there was any intention on Fitzgerald's part to link this in any way, The Great Gatsby in any way, to Wuthering Heights. But I found that there, and I think that's the beauty of intertextuality and the beauty of the cultural consciousness in the literary sense too. Of it does affect things in very beautiful ways that are sometimes subconscious to the writer. So anyway, that's my little talk for today on how the larger cultural consciousness can sometimes mar the real intention and beauty of some wonderful books. So check those 2 books out.